It's not even July yet, but the time to start talking football is now. Welcome to Gold Sheet TV and our first NFL preview, talking AFC East with my good friend, WagerTalk handicapper, Adam Trigger. Adam, before we dive right into it, what's going on? How you doing? Thank you for hopping on the show today.
No, I'm doing great. It's it's nice to talk some football. We've been grinding baseball out for a couple months now, but yeah, as you said, July is around the corner, which means August will come up quickly after that. And once we're in August, we're betting preseason games. The season kind of just comes up out of nowhere. So good to get the conversation rolling now, and I think a lot of this will be helpful. Once the season starts.
Yeah, we were chopping up before the show, and Adam and I were both talking about how, while obviously there are a ton of people who are already firing on NFL future bets right now, that we're two guys that right now are still in like the evaluation mode. Like, we are understanding who's favorited to win what division, like what the market thinks of these teams, but neither of us are at the point where we're ready to be throwing out bets yet. But it always helps to have a discussion around the current market, how they're viewing certain teams. So then when, a couple of weeks from now, I assume would be a time for both of us to start actually throwing some money down on some of these games. Before we hop right in, I want to remind everybody that at GoldSheet.com, all three of our football products that you've known and loved are now combined to be one product. Is $129 only through June 30th. So you have 2 more days to get that cost for early bird before it bumps up to $149. Brief reminder there, right on the front page of GoldSheet.com. But we're talking AFC East to kick off the show, and what other big storyline is there than Aaron Rodgers? Not only Aaron Rodgers, Nathaniel Hackett, Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, the entire Packers offense, for the most part, jokes aside, headed over to New York. The real question here is, Trigger, again, we're not making any wagers right now. We're just kind of discussing our thoughts, comments, concerns right now. I'm just going to ask you simply, Rodgers to the Jets, all things considered from last year and what they've done in the draft and in free agency, you think it'll work?
I think it can work. I think if it does work, the Jets could be a top 5 team. I don't think that's really a stretch to say that. If you look, last year, Mike White doesn't get hurt, they might make the playoffs. They're, top 5 in the NFL in both points and yards allowed, for the fewest. So they certainly seem to be good on that side of the ball. So one would think bringing Aaron Rodgers and some upgrades to the offense in would improve this team to the point. But I guess we need to define, what does work mean, right? Like, what does it working mean? Does it mean they're going to be better than last year? Because if that's the case, then okay, I think they can improve on 7 and 10 or whatever it was that they were last year. Does it mean getting to a Super Bowl? That's where I think we have to define what is will it work mean? Because I think the team can be pretty good. I've liked Robert Saleh ever since he took over. I thought it was a great hire. Of course, goes 4-13 in his first season. It was 7 and 10 last year. Can they improve on that? They should. But I kind of go back to the schedule and what happens if this team faces some adversity early. You look at their schedule and how it starts. They play the Bills on Monday Night Football. Then they go to Dallas. They have a home game against the Patriots, which would, I guess, be perceived as a winnable game, but still in the division. I don't know that Jets-Patriots in any year, when one is bad or one is good, is ever an easy game. They got the Chiefs after that. They go to Denver, which is never an easy game, having to go into the altitude. And then they play the Eagles. So, they could play well and still be 2-4. They could even be 1-5 against that schedule. And so I think that's what, will it work or not is maybe we'll have to see based on how they come out. But I certainly think that this team will be improved and there will be opportunities to jump in with them. I don't know if I'm going to be on the Jets winning the Super Bowl this year bandwagon, but I do think that depending on what happens, there's going to be a time to maybe get involved with the Jets. And we'll see when that time is. So probably not the most matter-of-fact answer, but can it work? Yeah, of course. This team's got the pieces to be top 10.
Yeah, so I think that's a great point because obviously, work at this point is relative, right? If you're not improving, especially giving them what they paid for Rodgers, which, the trade market was to find Rodgers was leaving anyway. The Packers did not have a ton of leverage there. Obviously, they have to be at least better than last year, but I think what you made was a great point because work for the Jets right now isn't just even making the playoffs. right? This is a team that is going all in, chips to the middle of the table, where
Right.
I'm not saying Super Bowl or bust, because obviously like this isn't a team, like they don't know how to win. They haven't been
Right.
made a playoff runs in a decade plus. So it's not like this team knows what they're doing in that sense. But one thing I will like refute you on, just don't agree with, is I personally think that Rob Saleh is one of the worst coaches in football. I think that his demeanor in the offseason has kind of shown that. He's kind of been putting the pressure all on his team. He kind of made some comments earlier this offseason where after they acquired Rodgers, basically saying like, if this doesn't work out, the fault is kind of on the players because we've amassed a bunch of talent. I don't think that he's the leader of men to bring this team to the elite level that they could be at. But with that being said, I think that a really important thing that's gone on this offseason with Rodgers is the fact that he has shown up to the Jets minicamps. He's throwing with Garrett Wilson, going to Knicks games with Sauce Gardner. Like those are things that shows that maybe Rodgers' slight decline last season, which from a metric standpoint, he did not play great football last season. But I think it had to do more with him being tuned out with Green Bay versus losing his talent. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because his play last year was just not great, simply put. But I think it's more so because he was just done with that chapter of his life. And you can't be betting against Aaron Rodgers to not have one more vintage season in his arm. Whether that leads to a championship is another question, though.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I felt like, I watched a ton of Packers football last year. I felt like he kind of checked out. I mean, I can recall plays where, it was like there'd be a 4th and 2, and he'd just throw the ball into the stands. It was just like you kind of felt that when you were watching them. I guess I like Saleh as more of like a sideline, guy that's gonna kind of keep his team, like cheer them on. Like he profiles as the type of coach I typically like. You make good points there, and again, now it's like we'll see how he functions with the expectations, right? Because no one expected much from him his first couple of years, and instantly there's going to be expectations. And then you made a great point. Do they know how to win? Well, if they don't know how to win, that first stretch that I talked about with the schedule, like those are games like they could easily be 1-5 and lose 3-4 close games because they're going to be up against teams like the Bills or going on the road to a team like the Cowboys or the Chiefs that do know how to win close games. And that's where that's probably where I'll decide whether I'm going to buy or sell this team. Because after that 6-game stretch, they go into a bye week. If they start poorly, this might be a team where out of the bye week, you get some value on betting them week to week. But you're probably not going to get the value early on just because of the Rodgers hype. Doesn't mean they couldn't still potentially be a good team, but if we're betting numbers here and we're talking about, trying to find and make good bets, it's probably going to take a few losses and for the New York media to jump in and say, this is, team's terrible. Probably going to take that to find actual, good spots to maybe bet the Jets going forward. So it's going to be an interesting team, and I'll probably, I'll probably be more in evaluation mode the first few weeks of the season, just because I don't know if I'm going to want to bet against them, but I'd be shocked if there's much value backing them in those first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I'm going to completely agree with you there. I'm obviously intrigued. What's not to be intrigued about? A top 10 defense, well, obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the history of the game. Skilled position players, undoubtedly. Offensive line, always a concern a little bit there, but a ton to like. And again, I think it's a great point that right this second, plus 270, maybe even to win the AFC East, no need to do that. They lose 2 games and Buffalo starts 2-0 because they're going to play 1 game against Buffalo. You might just get a better price at week 3 versus right now. So no need to jump the gun there. Speaking of the Buffalo Bills, team obviously has just been let down in the playoffs. They lost defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier. He's taking a leave of absence. Sean McDermott, though, got an extension. He's not going anywhere. The team that's slightly underrated now. Underrated in the sense where they're not getting the media attention. Obviously, you have Rodgers overshadowing that there, taking it over in the AFC East. The Bengals getting all the love now because they're winning the games. The Chiefs, of course, for obvious reasons. Just talk to me in general, Adam. Given that, I'm not going to say the media is down on Buffalo. They're still the favorites to win the AFC East. They're still in the tops to win the AFC in terms of odds for the championship and so on and so forth. But based on the Bills not really doing all too much this offseason, didn't sign any big names, didn't make any crazy deals, what do you think about this team moving, looking into this year? Do you expect kind of more of the same, or what do you just give me a general overview. Like, what are you thinking about the Buffalo Bills outlook so far heading into 2023?
Yeah, I mean, I still think they're the best team in this division. So just to go back to last year, I only made two futures bets in the NFL. One was the Giants season win total over, which won, and the other was the Bills to win the Super Bowl, which I got in at a nice price. Like, I think I had like 7-1, plus 750, which was, a lot better than most people were taking, like 4-1 on this, like a little bit into the season. And of course, they let me down. And I think a big reason for the letdown was, and I didn't think it at the time, but man, looking back, like Von Miller going out was really sort of impactful, really, impacted their pass rush. And suddenly, they couldn't defend. And of course, like the tragedy surrounding Damar Hamlin is what gets remembered, but forget how important he was to that defense. And then so he goes down with obviously a season-ending injury. And suddenly the Bills aren't able to stop anyone. And I really feel like that kind of, cost them last year. Now, it'll be interesting to see how, if they've been able to improve on that. I guess theoretically you would think that they'd be healthier on the defensive side of the ball, but they might start the year without Williams. They're going to be without Tremaine Edwards now, who doesn't come back. So I guess I'm going to kind of, be watching this team and into the mini camps and in the preseason to see, what their defense looks like, because I really think there's no problem with their offense. Josh Allen, Super Bowl caliber quarterback. I love the Dalton Kincaid pick. Thought that was a great draft pick by them. I think he's, to get him where they got him in the draft, instant, another weapon right there. And they did, kind of improve, the offensive line, at least I would say. So I thought the Bills had a pretty good draft. And when a team like the Bills has a good draft that's already sort of near the top, you have to kind of keep them there. So the ceiling for them, Super Bowl, I don't think that's, really a bold sort of prediction at this point. They're still the favorites to win this division. And as you already mentioned, they're one of the favorites. But it's all going to depend on their defense. And, if they're a team that's if that defense isn't elite, they might be a good fade against the number, because they're going to be priced as a top team. And if they're giving points up, that back door might be open. And we sort of saw that last year. After Miller went down, there was a number of games that they kind of the Browns is one that comes to mind, the game that was played up in Detroit. I think they got through the back door there, maybe by a half point. And there was others where, the Bills they didn't close out games in dominant fashion. So I'm going to be watching to see what the Bills defense looks like. And if they're sluggish on the defensive side of the ball, I almost think from a week-to-week basis, they're probably a fade against the number. But certainly, you got Josh Allen, you have those offensive weapons. They've got to be, in the mix, and I think they still probably find a way to win this division.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things that I agree with there. For starters, I do think that Dalton Kincaid was a fantastic draft pick to give them more versatility offensively. I think that one of their bigger issues last year was their inability to find a consistent wide receiver 2 and 3. Obviously, you had your Gabe Davis couple of breakout weeks when Stephon Diggs being one of the best receivers in football. There was a little bit of a drama there too. But I think that the Leslie Frazier leaving is a really big issue, because he's been the architect of the defense. I know Sean McDermott is a defensive-minded coach, and he's done a great job with this unit. But one of the key signings I think they made later in the offseason, so it wasn't one of those big ticket items, but I think getting Leonard Floyd was a huge pickup for Buffalo, because their pass rush, think about what they've done in the last 3 or 4 drafts. They've spent, besides this past year where they drafted Kincaid, they've spent on Ed Oliver, on Boogie Basham. They were spending all these first and second round picks on defensive linemen, because they couldn't find the right defensive lineman rotation. Sure. And we all know how a big pass rush is a huge factor. So I think getting Von Miller back, adding Leonard Floyd, giving a little bit of 2021 Rams vibes there, is actually a great addition to this team, because obvious reasons. Got to get after the passer. But I will say, though, if this season, and obviously we're not going to project too far in advance, but if this is another year where there's more stagnation in Buffalo, they maybe even win the East, they're out in round 1 or 2, they don't even make it to the conference finals in the AFC there, this window has got to be really small, right? I'm not saying this is win or bust for this team, but the window might be closing. Is that egregious to say?
It depends. As long as you have Josh Allen there, I think there's opportunity. Going back to the defense, that was a disappointing year for the defense. Like if you go back to the beginning of last season and then the season prior, I mean, so much more was expected from that defense that I wonder if just like the fact that they were disappointing maybe motivates them more in the offseason to like just get back to the level they were, defensively 2 years ago when they, went out in the AFC championship game. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly notable. Like it's going to be a thing. Like if they kind of fizzle out, make it to the division round and lose, or make it to the wild card round and lose, like, yeah, there will be probably some changes made. But I don't know if the window is that small, because I still think I still think their roster is the best of any of the teams in the league, and Allen's not going anywhere anytime soon. So I would say with the right moves, they can be in it, but it's probably a fine line. I guess I'll say that.
No, I agree. And like doubling down that they are incapable of getting that pass rush going and finding some help for Stephon Diggs there, then I think it could be a situation where, like, again, like I'm not running to the window right now to bet the Bills at plus 500 to be that winner of the AFC.
Definitely
absolutely not.
Definitely not. Yeah, and I would say again, going back to like we're trying to cash tickets here. If the defense shows flaws, you should just fade this team against the number, because they're gonna come in and be very likely be overvalued. So that's and it just goes to like the conversation of the whole division. There's three teams, and we're going to talk about the third in a second, that are essentially, like, many people have them in their top 10. Some even have them all near the top 5 or somewhere in like the middle of the top 10. You almost just can let the market's going to kind of tell you what you can and can't do with these teams, in my opinion. And so you just kind of wait and see.
I think that's a great way to go about it. Like a wait and see approach is never the wrong thing. Yep. I know these lines are up. I know they've been up since February. I know people are excited to bet football, but patience is also a virtue 100%. Moving on down south, Miami, Florida. Miami Dolphins, playoff team last year, gave the Buffalo Bills a ton of issues toward the end of the season, like very close to upsetting them. Obviously, they had a lot of missed games from quarterback Tua Tagovailoa due to terrible concussions. Hope that he is okay. We have a lot to talk about whether or not we think Tua is that guy, but this is the team that's gone all out. They made the trade for Jalen Ramsey to make this defense, or try to improve this defense and put together one of the better secondaries in all of football. They have Christian Wilkins up front. They have an absolute animal, pretty decent. Like overall now, this defense is probably a formidable unit. Was probably one of the bigger issues last year. Mike McDaniel, the head coach, he got so much love for his quirky personality and his media presence, but he was brought into Miami to be this, like, he came from the run game coordinator from the 49ers to be this, like, amazing run game creator, and the Miami Dolphins were last in the league in rushing attempts per game, considering that they had Tua, who was a limited quarterback in a lot of capacities. So just going to flip the conversation a little bit here. Miami, big for Ramsey. I think their defense has improved undoubtedly. They have just weapons all over the place. That team speed is ridiculous, and still Dalvin Cook could even be in the mix here too. But I can't say they're a sleeper because, like you said, a lot of people have them in the top 10. But, like, what do you think the ceiling is now for this Miami Dolphins team? Like, they made the playoffs last year. They got incrementally better. You can definitely argue this year, like, is this a legitimate AFC competitor right
now? They can be. Like, so I think the answer there is they absolutely can be. And, as far as being a sleeper, I feel like they might be many people's sleepers. It doesn't mean they're not going to still be very good and compete in the AFC. The problem with the Dolphins, well, I guess it's not really a problem. It's going to be like the offensive line has to hold up, because if it doesn't, that like the Tua is probably that guy, but he's not that healthy. Like the guy that stays healthy. So if they can keep him upright and then protect him, he can run that offense. And if you can get the ball into the hands of Hill and Waddle, they can do a lot of good things. And you already mentioned, and which I agree with, I mean, they upgraded, the defense upgraded significantly. I mean, this team was so bad against the pass last year. They were just torched against opposing teams' aerial attack. Ramsey instantly is going to make that better. And they have other signings. I think Elliott is one that, like, should make them better. It should make them better. I should have wrote it down. But anyway, the defense was good last year. The pass defense wasn't great. You bring in Ramsey, the defense should be fine. It's all going to come down to the offensive line and if they can keep Tua healthy. Because the problem is you go out and get so the backup presumably is going to be Mike White, but he doesn't stay healthy either. And so,
True.
You can't, it's hard to matter of factly say, and I guess that goes with most teams, you get to a scenario like last year, the Dolphins had a great season, they get to the playoffs, and then they don't have a quarterback. And that's kind of, I guess, the concern here. Tua hasn't had a full season. He's never played every game of a season, So I think it's a real concern to say, okay, well, it's a big if he stays healthy, and it's a bigger if the offensive line can't protect him. And that was the sort of the issue for them at times last year. And I also don't know that they really have fully addressed it in the offseason. I think they only had 4 draft picks. So they weren't able to do much via the draft. So it's going to be interesting. This is going to be another team where I'm going to kind of see how the market treats them. Because the nice thing here is you've got 3 teams in the same division, and specifically you have 2 teams in the Jets and Dolphins that everyone can't be overrated, right? Because especially in the same division when you've got these teams playing each other. So it's going to be sort of interesting to see. As you know, Eric, NFL. No one overreacts more than NFL fans and NFL bettors from week to week. So it's really going to be interesting to see how these teams start, where their strengths and weaknesses are on the first couple weeks of the season. But I have to say that if the Dolphins aren't protecting Tua, they'll probably be a team I look to oppose. And if he's just staying upright, he's not getting hit, this Dolphins team could potentially factor into the AFC title race, because top to bottom they're that good. But it's going to be the weaknesses that I'm looking at. Offensive line, the health of Tua, the 2 biggest in my opinion. But I don't think it's a stretch to say this defense is going to be a lot better. And if the defense is good, the Dolphins should be in the mix.
Yeah, and I'm just looking right now at DraftKings odds for AFC Championship. Right now, the Jets and Dolphins both plus 1,100. I'm sure there are better numbers for both of those teams out there. Just currently only looking at DraftKings, so obviously shop around with anything. But
sure.
If you're giving me the Jets and the Dolphins plus 1,100, obviously there are 14 other teams that can win the AFC. But at both of those 2 teams at that same number, I would have to take the Jets every single time personally. But also guess please go.
No, and I was just going to say the odds, especially if you start to look at the schedule, and we already talked about the Jets schedule. I mean, the odds of both of those teams starting off on fire is pretty slim. So, I would say you kind of maybe missed the boat to bet the Jets. I know some people that got down on the Jets, before they got Rodgers. Obviously, if you're holding any of those tickets, that's ideal. But again, just because the Jets go out, let's say they lose to the Bills, the Cowboys, start 1-3, doesn't necessarily mean they're a bad team, and you're going to be able to come in and you probably will get the numbers that the people that bet before Rodgers was there got. Same thing with the Dolphins. If they come out a little bit cold, doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to have a great season. So I would almost say those 2 teams, might be I would probably look after a couple of weeks, wait till people overreact, because right now there's just too many people are too high on both of those teams, in my opinion, to get real value backing them in a long-term scenario. So I'm more of a week to week, and we'll see if there's a good spot to jump in.
Yeah, and we both have mentioned, we're both just scratching the surface of our NFL breakdown for the season, right? We have a ton of legwork to do. Our opinions today are not going to be our opinions maybe in 6 hours from now, realistically, right? It's just the way it works. You learn new information, you form new opinions. But just looking at this conference winner on DraftKings, seeing the Jaguars, Chargers, Browns, Broncos, even Patriots, all having significantly worse odds than the Dolphins at plus 1,100. That's a number I want nothing to do with personally. At the moment, we'll see how things shape out, get into training camp and so on and so forth. But at the moment, while I can see why people are loving the Dolphins, and I do think that they have a good roster, I'd be more inclined to take a look at the Jets, at all those teams, and even the team we're going to talk about next, New England Patriots, last and not, I mean, a team that so interesting, right? So last year they were, excuse my language, a shit show, right? Like you never see a Bill Belichick team letting special teams touchdowns, having all these mental mistakes and just playing bad football, right? That is not what Bill Belichick's teams do. You can blame it on a variety of factors. Mac Jones' inability to take that next step. Why didn't he take that step? Is it because he isn't that good, or is it because they didn't have a great structure around him offensively with minimal weapons and just literally no offensive coordinator? Obviously, you have to give Belichick the benefits of the doubt there. So they bring Bill O'Brien in, and I just have to say this, that obviously, like, the media still are harping on the DeAndre Hopkins trade and how Bill O'Brien was one of the worst GMs in football, blah, blah, blah. Okay, yes, I think that he was not a great general manager when he was coach and general manager. He was a hell of a football coach. He goes down to Alabama. He redoes that offense. Like, he was winning games with Deshaun Watson. The Texans were a playoff fixture. So I am very bullish on Bill O'Brien. I think that is a major acquisition for the Patriots. Obviously, they already have their history. Christian Gonzalez, I think, is a fantastic draft pick. Looking at like Riley Reef, they had some tackles. Like, I think like Juju Smith-Schuster, like, okay, signing this team did anything to get like really, really much, much better. But the one biggest thing is that this was a team that ranked by many metrics in the top 5 defensively. However, you break down the quarterbacks they played, including teams like the Cardinals with injuries and others, they played like one of the worst stretches of quarterbacks ever. So yes, you have to take advantage of your situations, but anytime you saw them play a legitimate quarterback, they were getting roasted, and they were also making these mental mistakes, so they ended up missing the playoffs. Again, not even by much. So talk to me, like, what's your outlook on the Patriots? Like, are you bearish on them considering the strength of the division? Do you think that they're another sneaky type team? Like, just where's your head at with the Patriots?
So I think from against the spread, the Patriots might be a good bet. I think they might be one of the worst 5 teams in football, to be honest. And like, just like when that might be a little harsh, but in my opinion, they're going to be the worst team in this division. I'd be shocked if they don't finish last. And here's like my whole thing with the Patriots. Like, this looks like a rebuild to me. Like, they're a team that's in rebuild mode. I think if it was any team other than the Patriots, the consensus would be, okay, like this team's rebuilding. They're probably going in the right direction. They had a pretty good draft. I thought they did well in the draft, and like have some nice pieces, like where they'll probably like it's a team that I think could make improvements from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. So like, if this is a team that comes out and isn't great through the first 8 weeks, I think they have the pieces where they take a step forward toward the end of the season. And at that point, if that's the case, they're probably going to be a bet on type team, because they're the team that no one wants a part of in this division. So like, they're everyone wants the Bills, Dolphins, and Jets. No one wants the Patriots. I just think if it wasn't the Patriots, like, there's still that crowd out there that's like, well, it's Belichick, it's the Patriots. I think if they had any other jersey and any other coach, people would be like, yeah, this is a team in rebuild mode. The O'Brien signing is great. I think that's going to definitely improve their offense, but they still lack much of an offensive line. And if there's one thing year to year in this league, you can't reach your full potential without a good offensive line. It doesn't mean you can't win, because there's teams that find ways to win in spite of a bad offensive line. But those teams typically would have always been better had their offensive line been strong. And I think that's where the issue is going to come in for the Patriots offense. It might not. I mean, I've never been like sold on Mac Jones being like a legitimate starting NFL quarterback, but I do think he probably, O'Brien might help him improve. The detractor here, the thing that might, keep him struggling, is the offensive line if they can't get it together. They're not loaded with weapons, but again, there's still pieces. So as far as like, do I think the Patriots contend for anything this year? No, probably not, especially in a division where, the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills are all likely going to be better than them. So that's 6 pretty tough divisional games right there. But I'm not writing the Patriots off from an ATS perspective. In fact, they'll probably be undervalued to the point where there's going to be times to jump in with them. I can almost guarantee this team will improve from the start of the season to the end of the season. So they're a team I'm looking for, if they're coming in if they're like 2-5 and everyone gives up on them, I think they have like it's enough of a rebuild where they'll probably like start to play well toward the end of the year. But am I expecting, like, would I bet this team to win the division? No, absolutely not. Do I think they're coming a game away from the playoffs this year? Definitely not. Like, I would sell them in that manner and say that they're probably a little bit overvalued based on the fact that their head coach is Bill Belichick and that they're the Patriots, because I just don't see the talent in relation to the rest of the division to really have a chance to contend for anything this year.
Yeah, so I'm going to put my hand up. I'm in that boat where I still have to give Belichick the benefit of the doubt. I am aware of the situation that they dealt with in terms of playing a bad group of quarterbacks last year that kind of boosted their defensive metrics. But at the same time, like, just looking again, I'm sure there's better odds out there, but on DraftKings, like the Miami Dolphins to make the playoffs, yes, -110, no, -110. Patriots, yes, +250, no, -300. Again, like, not dying to jump at any of these numbers, but if you had to tell me right now I had to make a single bet, the Dolphins at standard vig or the Patriots at +250 to make the playoffs, I'm personally taking the Patriots every single time. I could definitely be eating these words because, again, I think can't overstate the fact that they played such a bad gauntlet of quarterbacks that definitely made these numbers look a little bit better than they were in every defensive metric. But at the same time, I think that there is confidence. I think their offensive line did deal with some injuries, some nonsense, but I love the players that they drafted there. I think that if anybody's going to cultivate some of their younger talent, Patriots are a team, because when looking at how a team is going to improve season to season, obviously you consider who they added through the draft and through free agency. You also can't forget that they already drafted and added players from free agency the season before, and they expect those players to progress. So if they do see the positive progression, even if it's like a team like Tangent, the Chargers didn't really do much this offseason, they're getting players healthy back, and they have players from last year that they drafted that they're expecting to take a step up. So again, opinions on these topics can certainly change day in and day out. At this moment, there's no reason to be firing any money and getting in bad numbers now. But I actually am more on the wavelength where the Patriots are going to continue to be around the 500 team and around 500 now, considering the way the ball breaks. If they end up being 9-8, it could be a sneak-in spot for the postseason. But Adam, this was an absolutely fantastic conversation. We had a blast, and I'm sure you'll be on not only for maybe another preview, but also content the entire season long. Where can the audience find you?
Yep, you can find me at WagerTalk.com. Also on Twitter at TopFlightSI. And yeah, I mean, we're just kind of getting started, so we'll be firing these out all year, and hopefully this information will help you cash some tickets down the road.
Yes, sir. We're just scratching the surface on football. Adam and I are getting right back to that baseball grind that I know has been killing both of us day in and day out. Final reminder, GoldSheet.com. All three products, Gold Sheet, Confidential Kickoff, and Extra, are now one amazing product. $129 through end of day tomorrow. That's the cost of the whole season for 4.5 individual weeks. That early bird price will go up after the 30th to $150. So get in at $129, goldsheet.com. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a great holiday weekend.